On a warm night in early spring, in a quiet rural town called Maraway, tucked deep inside the northern highlands of a country known as Kantara, a group of teenage students gathered inside a modest boarding school called Northfield Academy, unaware that this ordinary evening would quietly split their lives into a before and an after. And for hours, everything felt familiar and almost peaceful. Dim lights buzzing overhead, pages turning, pens tapping against desks, friends whispering jokes to calm exam nerves, teachers moving through hallways reminding students to focus, while outside the wind brushed lazily against tin roofs and tall grass, until just after midnight when a distant rumble crept into the background, the low growl of engines moving slower than traffic ever did in Maraway, a sound that several people would later remember hearing but never reacting to, because in forgotten places, danger often blends into routine, and within minutes, shadowed figures wearing mismatched clothing and stolen insignias surrounded the school grounds with unsettling precision, disabling guards before alarms could be raised, cutting power lines, forcing doors open, flooding classrooms with blinding light and shouted commands spoken in fractured dialects, dragging terrified students into the open as confusion instantly turned into panic. Some frozen in shock, some crying, some clinging desperately to friends as they were torn apart. And while a small number managed to break free, sprinting barefoot into nearby fields, diving into tall grass, hiding in drainage ditches while gunshots cracked through the night, the majority were forced onto waiting vehicles that vanished down dirt roads leading into wilderness so vast it swallowed sound itself, leaving behind scattered notebooks, broken glasses, overturned desks, abandoned shoes, and a silence so heavy it felt intentional. And by sunrise, Maraway woke to chaos as parents ran toward the school gates calling names that went unanswered, counting faces again and again as disbelief turned into horror, realizing that over 200 children were gone, and as shock hardened into grief, anger followed close behind, directed at officials who arrived late, spoke vaguely, contradicted one another, and offered rehearsed reassurances without plans, while families ignored instructions and searched forests themselves, following rumors, footprints, scraps of fabric, and false hope that collapsed repeatedly. And as days passed with no clear answers, the story spilled beyond Kantara's borders, first through regional broadcasts, then exploding across global media, transforming Maraway into a symbol overnight, with images of empty classrooms and crying parents circulating endlessly, igniting protests, slogans, online campaigns, and promises from distant leaders who had never walked the cracked roads or dim hallways of Northfield Academy. Yet while speeches were made and statements issued, time slipped forward, and deep inside remote territories controlled by an extremist faction known only as the Veil, the abducted students were stripped of names, schedules, and identities, forced into a rigid existence built on fear, obedience, and psychological pressure, told repeatedly that their families had forgotten them, that resistance was pointless, that escape meant death. And according to later accounts from those who fled, days blurred together under strict routines, hunger, exhaustion, indoctrination, and punishment, while nights brought quiet sobbing, whispered prayers, secret friendships, and escape plans that often ended before sunrise. And as weeks turned into months, the world's attention drifted toward newer crises, resurfacing only when a small group managed to escape, or when authorities announced negotiations or recoveries that reunited some families while reopening wounds for others, creating a cruel imbalance where celebration and despair lived door to door in Maraway, where one home welcomed a return while the next continued to set an empty place at the table, and even as officials revised numbers and reports contradicted one another, what never changed was the waiting. The birthdays marked by silence, the untouched uniforms folded away, the belief shared by parents that as long as there was no proof of death, hope still existed, a belief strong enough to survive false sightings, broken promises, and years of disappointment. And as time passed, the story grew layers, with leaked recordings, disputed testimonies, and conflicting narratives emerging, some claiming secret deals had been made, others insisting corruption and incompetence had delayed rescues, while families were left to navigate rumor and truth without guidance. And inside captivity, the students themselves changed, growing older in isolation, measuring time by seasons instead of calendars, learning when to stay silent, when to obey, when to resist quietly, forming bonds that replaced family, holding on to memories so they wouldn't disappear completely, and when escapes did happen, they were chaotic and dangerous, involving long treks through hostile terrain, days without food or water, constant fear of recapture. Yet each return reignited Maraway's collective hope, even as it deepened the pain for those still waiting, and gradually the town itself transformed. Shops closed, laughter faded, murals appeared on walls, the school gates rusted, and Northfield Academy stood as a silent monument to a single night that reshaped everything. And internationally, the story became shorthand for broader failures, for how education can become a battleground, how innocence can be punished for daring to imagine a future beyond circumstance, and how outrage, though powerful in the moment, often fades faster than suffering does. And as years passed, the narrative settled into documentaries, timelines, and footnotes reduced to dates and numbers. Yet for those living it, the story never became history at all, remaining a living wound that shaped every decision, every prayer, every quiet moment. A reminder that behind every headline is a life interrupted. Behind every statistic is a voice that once laughed, planned, and hoped, and that the true cost of tragedies like this is not measured in days, months, or even years, but in futures permanently altered, in communities forever changed, and in questions that still echo through the hills of Kantara when the wind moves through abandoned classrooms and broken gates, unanswered, unresolved, and impossible to forget.